and grow in a more environmentally friendly way. So first, meeting the changing needs of Oregonians. It's very clear that in order to do this, we need more housing options and a wider variety of housing sizes. Housing needs are changing as family sizes are getting smaller, and the number of single-person households in Oregon and in the country is growing. Over half of all households in Oregon are only 1 or 2 people. But prior to House Bill 2001, on the vast majority of land zoned for residential use in Oregon, it was illegal to build anything other than a single-family home. One of the things that I'm particularly passionate about is affordable housing for younger people, and middle housing is especially critical for that. A young couple in Eugene or Portland may not be able to afford a single-family home when they're 24 or 25 years old, but perhaps they could afford a townhome. When my husband and I were in our 20s, of course, and we were looking to buy our first house, of course we wanted a single family home with a big yard for our dogs that was close to where we worked. But the reality was we just couldn't afford that. So in the meantime, we bought a condo and built equity until we could afford something that was a single family home. And middle housing is also important for our seniors who are looking for a way to age in place or in a place that has more community. The cottage cluster kind of housing is an interesting model that provides more community for our seniors. So second, single family zoning has historically been used in many places as a tool to keep neighborhoods both economically and racially segregated. It's no secret that in our country and in our state, we have a history of using tools like redlining in order to keep neighborhoods racially segregated. But fewer people are aware of the impact that our land use and our housing codes have had on the economic and racial segregation of our communities. Last year, Governing Magazine published a story about housing segregation in Illinois that was based on about 6 months of research they did. And I just want to read a quote from one of the articles there. "We found that local governments bear much of the responsibility for creating and maintaining segregated communities. When it comes to land use, what gets built where, governments use zoning restrictions to keep out rental housing, which attracts communities of color from predominantly white areas. They often explicitly bar any other use than single-family homes." On the topic of economic segregation and its impact on economic mobility, the economist Raj Chetty has done a significant amount of research on what he calls high opportunity neighborhoods. The data is clear that when children grow up in a high opportunity neighborhood, they are significantly more likely to be able to move from the lower end of income distribution to the upper end. So increasing the diversity of housing types in these neighborhoods is one way to ensure that more kids have the chance to benefit from them, which increases economic mobility in our community. So to me, re-legalizing missing middle housing speaks to what we want our communities to look like. If we want to move towards a more integrated communities that are less segregated by income and race, and that provide more economic opportunity for all of their residents, then revising our land use policies to allow middle housing is a small step in the right direction. And finally, just a quick note on the environmental impact of housing diversity. Exclusive single-family development promotes sprawl and less environmentally responsible patterns of development. Denser development helps protect our Oregon's farm and forest land, which I know most of the folks on this call care about. Multi-unit developments have a lower carbon footprint than single-family homes, and increasing the diversity of our housing stock will help create more walkable neighborhoods and prevent sprawl. For all of those reasons, housing affordability, the environmental impact, more integrated neighborhoods, and meeting the needs of Oregonians, I am very excited about all the projects you're going to see here today. Before the pandemic, I actually went on a non-virtual tour of middle housing in Eugene in one of our older neighborhoods. And in addition to just being an opportunity to see some really cool housing types, it was fascinating to learn about the history of that particular neighborhood and how prior to World War II, these types of middle housing were actually the norm in communities all across the country. We've lost a little bit of that since World War II. And I think bringing back middle housing is a part of the solution to the housing crisis that we face. I appreciate all the work that everyone here on this call is doing, and I'm looking forward to seeing more about these projects. Ezra?
Thank you so much, Representative Fahey. We are such fans of yours and your tireless work in Salem, helping advance opportunities for new housing across the state. It's because of champions like you that Oregonians are going to have housing and ample housing in the coming decades. So thank you. I'm very excited to announce our tour guide for today's presentations. That's Cole Peterson. Cole is the godfather of ADUs. He's based in Portland, Oregon, and he has helped spur the catalytic growth of accessory dwelling units across the state through education, advocacy, consulting work, and entrepreneurship. He's the author of Backdoor Revolution, the definitive guide to ADUs, and runs accessorydwellingunits.org and buildinadu.com. Cole is currently serving as a volunteer on 2 House Bill 2001 implementation committees, which is advising the state on the middle housing codes. Cole, thank you so much for joining us today. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Ezra. And I want to just give a shout out to the Home Builders Association and Metro for convening this event. It's really exciting, and I know that there's people not just from Oregon, but from across the country who are here today. I run the citywide ADU tour in Portland, and so it's fun to now be involved in running a virtual tour. So we're going to kick it off and have Mike Mitchoff of Portland Houseworks come on out and present his project, and we'll go through the 6 projects and today, and then we'll hopefully have some time for Q&A at the end. Also, I want to mention that if you do have questions that you want to get out there into the mix, please use the question and answer button at the bottom of your Zoom webinar platform, and you can put questions in there and we'll get through as many of the questions as we can at the end. Thanks so much. Mike, take it away.
All right, thank you, Cole. Good afternoon, planners, elected officials, HBA, Metro, and Build Small Coalition members. I'm Mike Mitchoff, lifelong Portland resident and co-owner of Portland Houseworks. Portland Houseworks is a boutique infill builder of small homes here in Portland. I'm currently the chair of the Portland Builders and Urban Development Council of the HBA, as well as a member of the City of Portland's Residential Infill Projects Stakeholder Committee. Thank you for this great opportunity to share a few thoughts and projects that I'm very excited and proud of. Most importantly, our houses are attainable housing solutions to home ownership in our great city and state. Given the limited time, I'd like to show you our creative version of missing middle housing. The following slides are houses that we've built in the last few years, and I hope that they inspire you to be part of the solution as well. Oops. Are you getting my advance? There we go. My perspective comes from building and developing on a smaller scale in Portland neighborhoods for the last 20 years. Dense, smaller scale, highly efficient, well-located housing has always made sense to us due to its proximity to services, stores, transit, and infrastructure. Until recent widespread support, I felt as though I was building unicorns. With an official description, missing middle housing, and supportive policy template, HB 2001, among others, there's no doubt in my mind that we're all headed in the right direction. My co-presenters will address their specific motivations, but I believe at the top of most homeowners, builders, and policymakers' list should be affordability, or attainability, as I like to call it. We have built and sold approximately 45 smaller than average houses in Portland over the last 10 years in one form or another. And I would say that 85% of my buyers are first-time homeowners. I'm happy to be part of missing middle housing as my own kids, current tenants, neighbors, friends are looking to purchase a home in Portland soon. HB 2001 is no doubt going to incentivize more dense building possibilities throughout the state. But as a builder, that additional density doesn't always translate into additional units being built in volume, as one might think. HB 2001 will increase the number of units being built as a whole, but not necessarily home ownership. At Portland Houseworks, we look at missing middle housing through the home ownership lens, not just density. Additional rental units or housing options. The question is, how do we create additional housing stock that is affordable for future generations of homeowners? I think I speak for most builders when I say that this new policy is definitely moving the needle, but we need to think about the very people that all of this is intended to benefit, the prospective homeowner or renters in other cases. All of the costs and time delays trickle down to the end user. I'm pretty sure there are only a handful of local builders consistently delivering new construction houses in the urban core between $285,000 and $330,000, maybe even $500,000 for that matter. Correct, you heard me right, $285,000 for a brand new house in St. John's, $330,000 in Brentwood, Darlington, and $350,000 in Foster Powell. These are brand new, detached, single-family houses that you and I can call home, to build equity in, to be secure and stable in, and that are highly efficient and affordable for the long term. These detached houses are a creative interpretation of current zoning, but also a result of a somewhat dysfunctional and slow land use process. Although these are detached houses, they're condominiums because there's no other way to parcel them out to sell them to independent buyers separately. HB 2001 is going to open up a ton of new housing opportunities, but most of them will be rentals or condos, in my opinion, unless we further address some key issues. I've heard from dozens of infill builders, and I've asked them why they're reluctant to participate in missing middle housing. It's because vacant or underutilized land is expensive and really hard to find. The land use process to create additional lots is extremely slow, expensive, and cumbersome. Condo construction defect-related liability is ever present. Condo plats, surveys, and legal fees are complicated and expensive as well. System development costs or charges are currently as much as 25% of the entire cost of building a house. The recent corporate activity tax hits a home builder's bottom line immediately because we sell big ticket items. Duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes should not need to be attached. Detached housing is a preferred form of ownership for livability. The lot's density is exactly the same either way. Given these challenges, there's something even more rudimentary. It's the simple ownership structure preference that I've heard from homeowners and infill builders alike. This slide shows the preference that I've heard time and time again. The simple ownership structure is the most understood and preferred structure. These are the traditional detached standalone houses with exclusive ownership of the land that we're all used to. Then comes detached condominiums that I'm building, which are similar, but you don't own the land exclusively. And it's also part of an HOA. On down the list, you go to attached fee simple housing or attached condos where you share one or more walls, ceilings, or floors. Now that said, all of this has been good for business for us, but I want you to look closely at the next 4 slides. This is our model. We buy a large lot that would otherwise be zoned for a single house and or an additional ADU. We pursue a land division, which takes sometimes 12 to 15 months. Then we create 2 separate tax lots, and then we permit a new construction house with a detached ADU on each lot. So we have 4 completely separate detached houses, as can be seen in this slide. Then we get state approval for a detached condominium plat by combining the tax lots and the homes in order to sell them to separate buyers. This layout is the result. As you can see, there's 2 houses oriented toward the public street and smaller detached single-story houses with off-street parking toward the rear, with a shared easement for access. And please note the large maple tree that was protected and salvaged for the sake of the urban canopy. This is an attractive, affordable, livable example of infill homes in an older established neighborhood. This can be done over and over throughout each one of your cities. It can be as simple as a house and an ADU on a single family tax lot, or be an entire community of detached condominiums with multiple tax lots. These houses are an absolute addition to our city and neighborhoods, and most importantly, buyers love them because they can afford them. Wrapping up, My challenge to policymakers and planners in attendance is to look at the dense layouts of projects like this and figure out a pathway to make these be simple. In doing so, I guarantee missing middle housing will be the wave of the future for future homeowners in our great state. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks, Mike. That was a great presentation. And I think for people who are not in the Portland metro area, I think just to give some context, those numbers of the price that you provided for new construction might sound expensive if you're not in the Portland metro area, but that is very inexpensive. Am I right?
Correct.
Yeah. So like the average median single family house might be like statistical average might be in the low 400s right now. And so you're saying new construction, $300,000 price point. So that's very low in relative to any other single family residential property one could purchase. Am I correct?
Specifically for new construction.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
Okay. Douglas McLeod from Blue Sky Properties Northwest, please come on out.
Okay, you're gonna have to help me here. Am I out?
You're out.
All right. Okay, folks, thanks for being here. I'm really excited to be here as well. As Cole said, my name is Douglas McLeod. I've lived in Portland for 20 years and been a real estate broker. Worked with new construction builders for 15 years, the last 5 years of which I've been a small scale developer, a sort of boutique developer. What you're looking at right here is a project that I just completed. This is a typical residential neighborhood, R5 zoning,
And
5,000.
Doug, I'm going to interrupt you. Yeah, just please share your screen. There you go.
Sorry,
Thanks.
are we up? Are we up?
We are up. Thanks, Doug.
Sorry about that. So typical residential neighborhood, 5,000 square foot lots, a couple of double lots, and the red pin from Google Maps is on the lot where I did a 12 unit courtyard condominium project. So typical residential neighborhood. These two homes are adjacent to my project. If you look to the right, you can see my project going up. Most of the homes on the block are actually 2-story. This is a little bit difficult to read, but what I'd like you to take out from this is it's my site plan. We did 4 buildings, 3 units each, 5-foot setbacks on all sides, and in the middle, landscape courtyard, in the very center, a focal point, which was a hardscaped area for people to hang out with a gas fire pit and some polished cement benches. That is a design rendering of the project that gives you a sense of what the product looks like, and this is a better view of the completed project. So again, this is a condo project around a courtyard with 12 units, and I want to describe a little bit what those units are composed of. So they're all 2-bedroom, excuse me, I'm parched here. Sorry, folks. They're all 2 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, 15 feet wide, which is about as narrow as you want to go. And the sizes, there's 3 different plans. Essentially, the sizes are 840 square feet, 940, 1040. The backyards are 8 feet deep by 15 feet wide. Small units like this typically have a great room floor plan on the first, which I'll show you, which is what we have. We have 2 bedrooms upstairs, and again, 1.5 bathroom in most. In the very back units, we had 2.5 baths. Gas fireplace and some benches and a close-up of some landscaping. So energy efficiency is a little bit of an aside, but worth noting, these are super efficient. We received a 10 out of 10 EPS score because they're small and tight and well insulated, and because we put in electric mini splits and on-demand gas heating, gas water, very efficient units, cheap to live in. Okay, inside the house. When you enter the door, to the right is the kitchen. This is a very viable floor plan. For those of you who haven't been around units of this size, very viable. Okay, this is a staged unit, so that's a staged dining area. You could easily fit a 6-top table if you wanted. living room. There's no fence in the backyard in this shot, but you'll see that in a moment. So you're not staring at the neighbor's car. Master bedroom in the back upstairs, back of the unit upstairs, lots of light in all these units, which is very popular. And the front unit, this is just a shot that shows you all the glazing that I put in intentionally to sort of connect to the courtyard. I'll talk a little bit about logistics and how these rooms, a little bit about demographics and how these rooms are used. So 3 of the 12 buyers were younger couples, your typical first young couple, just married, first house scenario. There were 2 retirees, and the rest were sort of middle-aged folks, some of whom were divorced with kids, some single. Bathroom, backyard. So the backyard is 8 feet deep by 15 wide, and they actually do get used. Herb gardens, there's a couple of folks that hang out and play their guitar. Folks put dining tables out there and eat in the backyard. So these are actually viable, even though they're petite. That is Star, he's my cat. I did not plan to move in, but I did, with my girlfriend and my teenage daughter who's with me part-time. My 93-year-old father and brother moved into a different unit. So I wasn't planning on being there, but I did move in, and I can comment on some things that I think are really wonderful about this project, which is community. That's my girlfriend and a buddy of mine. They are social distance drinking IPAs in the courtyard. This is not a big space. It's 13 by 15 feet, but it is used by virtually everyone at some point. Even during COVID, people sit at 6 feet distance. Sometimes they'll sit around the perimeter a little bit more. But when you're thinking about your code, there's some things that you can do that will allow these kinds of opportunities, and some things that you can do that will take these away. And I think it's worth being mindful about that. I'll get to that in a moment. So sometimes that socializing goes on into the night. New construction is super soundproof, so it's been great that people can hang out and chit chat at night, and it's never really an issue. Last slide. That's actually my father, or was my father. He passed away recently, 93, and a couple of hooligans from the courtyard sitting around talking. This happens all the time. I lived in a wealthy neighborhood as a renter in East Moreland, in Southeast Portland, for 3.5 years. I never learned a single neighbor's name. We waved and smiled, didn't know a person. In 6 months, got a half dozen new friends. Someone goes berry picking, they've got extra berries, they distribute them around the courtyard. If an older person needs a piece of furniture moved upstairs, there's people around to do it. My next door neighbor has a 9-year-old daughter. Occasionally she'll get called out without notice to a meeting. Half a dozen people that will take that child in. It's been a really wonderful experience. And it's not by accident that these opportunities for community building exist. So last slide, that is a view this spring from my patio. So I want to say one thing. Cole, are you indicating time?
Yeah, it's time. Yep.
Do I have a minute?
No, you have 10 seconds.
I'll leave it there. I'll leave
Thanks,
it.
Doug.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually, there was a quick question for you. Are you sitting at one of your the units that you developed right now?
No, I'm down at the beach.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for your presentation, Doug. That was awesome.
Thank you.
All right. So next, we're going to bring out Erica Dunn of Green Hammer to present for us. Erica, come on out.
All right. Thanks so much for having me here.
Yeah.
So I am the Director of Design at Green Hammer, as Cole mentioned. I'm going to share my screen now. And we are a design build firm in Portland, focusing on zero energy, community-oriented projects. And like Representative Fahey, we are really excited by missing middle housing, because we also see it as part of the solution to a number of issues that we're facing today, including climate change, housing availability, as well as kind of the sense of isolation that we're seeing more and more, both in our cities and in our suburbs, as Doug was mentioning about not even knowing your neighbors sometimes. So today I'm presenting Tillamook Row, and this is, if I can advance forward. There we go. So the project is located in Northeast Portland at a transition point between a single family residential neighborhood and a major commercial district along North Williams Avenue, where there are many 4- and 5-story buildings. And we're on a lot that's equivalent to about 5 single family home lots in the city of Portland. And the project itself is a 16-unit, zero energy development with 5 owner-occupied units and 11 rental units, which is kind of an interesting mix of owner and rental occupied spaces. The units themselves range from 1 to 4 bedrooms and are between about 750 to 1,400 square feet. And as part of our efforts to keep the scale of the development down to kind of fit in with that single family residential neighborhood and be a nice transition to the commercial area, we broke the buildings down into actually 4 separate housing buildings and 1 central common house that's shared by all of the residents. And in terms of sustainability, as I mentioned, it's a zero energy project. And to get us there, we use a passive house approach, which means we are using super insulated building envelopes, including triple pane windows, airtight construction, and energy efficient mechanical systems. There's also a focus on solar orientation, so emphasizing solar access for both daylighting for the units, as well as the courtyard and all of our rooftop solar array that gets us to our zero energy. The site also really focuses on the community aspect of middle density housing, which I think is one of the most interesting parts of it. Part of that begins with this entrance, which is actually a mid-site entrance pedestrian access. So I think on the site plan we saw there was parking kind of off to the west side of the site, but we provided a pedestrian only entrance that takes you right into the center of the courtyard, so that as you're coming home, you can actually just enter through that great central courtyard past one of the 3 1,200-gallon rainwater reclamation tanks that we have on site. All of the units also have an entrance off that central courtyard, either from the ground floor or upstairs on a balcony area. And this is really intentional so that everyone is passing through that central courtyard as they're going home to their house. And also this sort of entry off of a courtyard as opposed to entry off of kind of a long corridor gives more of a sense of a single family home, even though you're living in a community of people. Within the units, we've placed the kitchens on that courtyard face so that people who are cooking and just washing dishes in the kitchen have a chance to wave hi to neighbors as they're going by. Also located to the side of the central courtyard is a community garden space that has the other 2 rainwater reclamation tanks that are used for watering the garden. And it's a garden that's available to anybody in the community who wants to use it. Also in that courtyard area is the shared common house, where folks can host parties or watch movies or sporting events together. And then upstairs in that shared common space is a gym where anybody can choose to work out. And then last but not least, I'm also going to end on the topic of COVID, which I think was on everybody's mind. And as we saw with Doug's project too, COVID has really changed the way we think about our outdoor spaces, and oftentimes people who are living in apartments maybe don't have access to outdoor spaces. This is a photograph that was sent to me recently by one of the owners of the development, and he, obviously it's a great example of social distancing, but he sent also this statement around that central courtyard and how people have been using it. He said, "The design of Tillamook Row with everyone's patio and the big courtyard is really turning out to be a blessing during this pandemic because it's allowing neighbors to interact from a distance. I think most of our residents truly enjoy the time to interact with each other, get a sense of normalcy and humanity, and escape the confines of their home." So I think that missing middle housing sometimes I think the increase in density is something that seems scary to people, but the community side of it is so important. And I think people actually see that you can bring the scale down so that it feels relevant to a single family residential neighborhood, as well as having that opportunity to connect with more of your neighbors. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been really interesting seeing how the kind of social connection that we're all able to have right now is all of a sudden being forced to be relative to where we live. And, you know, I've been hanging out with my neighbors next door, and we have a tiny house in our backyard, and I've been hanging out a lot with them. So I appreciate these suggestions about how middle housing is especially relevant in this context of COVID. We not have to be in it for too long, but if we
Right.
are, we'll have a place to be.
Exactly.
Thanks a lot, Erica.
Thank you.
Eli Green of Square Foot Studios, come on out.
Hi guys, thanks so much for having me, and thanks to all the attendees and panelists. It's a really wonderful discussion. I've learned a lot actually myself already, and it's wonderful to see so many people doing such interesting things and creating housing opportunities for people in a non-traditional way that we need so badly. So my name is Eli Green. I'm the owner and architect of Square Foot Studios. I'll start my screen share here and share with you a project that we developed. We focus on design build turnkey projects for residential customers. And ADUs, guest suites, home offices, there's several different types of buildings, but I'm going to focus on ADUs, which is the thing we do most actually. It's a wonderful opportunity for existing homeowners who want to be part of this solution. And the project I'm going to show you is a great representative of that. ADUs are development anybody can do. So if you're a homeowner, it's something that you can do on your property to be a part of this solution. And you can add housing and you can utilize that, leverage that however you choose, whether it's to rent it out at market value or rent it out even below market value if you can, to assist a family that might be in need of that. The family that we built this one for is doing just that, and they've created a community in their own backyard as well with some people they knew. It also helps maintain the scale of the neighborhood, which is something that's very important to people in Portland often, and it's, you know, one of the challenges of the middle housing development. So it's something that's an interesting element to that. It's less visible, it's a smaller scale, and it's something you can really get into quite easily. We focus on sustainability. All of our buildings are extremely efficient, and we try to give you the best possible quality construction for the best price you can get and make it something that's affordable for every homeowner in Portland. Let me jump right into this project and show you kind of what I'm talking about. So let's see if I can get this to advance here. So this is the project that I want to talk about. It's a 20 by 24 foot ADU. It was built in the backyard of a typical residential property in Portland, 50 by 100. And we try to create a nice sense of community and courtyard and still maintain some yard space. Maintaining privacy and a sense of ownership for each person and each party living on the lot is really important. And we really customize every project to that using the system that we developed to build these things for this high efficiency and good cost option. Many people contact us wanting to know about building an ADU in a garage that they already have, which is possible, or utilizing a slab, which is wonderful because people in Portland care about the environment, are aware of this, and utilizing those resources. Most often we find though that the garage is actually better to be demolished, and that the potential gain of the resources that you're saving is recovered very quickly in the matter of 2 or 3 years with new construction that's much higher performance. Our buildings are all of our ADUs are Earth Advantage Platinum certified, and I'm happy to provide more information about Earth Advantage, the great system for residential building ratings. It's a standard we build all of our buildings to. So you can see here on the left is the original garage, pretty large footprint, and on the right is the ADU that we built, kind of a similar location. One thing I want to note is that we built this in the setback, and that's going to be something that we're going to talk about in a second as well. Building in the setbacks is important and challenging at times, but if you know all the conditions, it's possible to get a lot out of it. Here's the floor plan of this one. The main entrance here, you're seeing the doors on the right approaches the driveway, and we really try to squeeze every possible ounce of useful space out of a design. So that means making spaces do double duty by ganging up spaces that have to stay open so that they're all utilized multiple ways. For instance, the door to the bathroom and the bedroom being right next to each other, and the washer dryer and the kitchen all being part of that same always open area. This unit has a very large, or larger than normal bathroom and 36-inch wide doors so that it's accessible to a larger population and also suitable for aging in place, which is really important. A lot of people come to us with a strategy to build an ADU that has an initial use of renting it out for long-term rental or sometimes short-term rental, but the SDCs are a big factor there. And there's future uses potentially. Maybe the owners of the property move into the ADU later and they rent out the primary dwelling instead. So we try to accommodate those future uses through future proofing and thoughtful design. This unit has a loft. I'll show you a couple pictures in a moment. This was just a storage loft, and lofts are doable in Portland. People always ask us about those too, because it's an exciting use of more space that would often be inaccessible. And there are ways to do it, but a full stairwell is really one of the requirements, or sprinkling, which can be an onerous cost. But we always like to look at those as options as well, because it is a more efficient use of space. This is a very nice vaulted space with the loft on the left there and the door to the bedroom, kitchen. And here's another view of that loft. We're actually working on an ADU right now in Selwood that has a habitable loft with sprinklers, which is a really great way to add accessible space and useful space. Like I said, a nice large bathroom that's would be suitable for somebody who has mobility challenges. This is a slide I just put together for this presentation to talk about cost, though, because that's one of the biggest barriers for people. And one of the beautiful things about middle housing is that it can create opportunities and openings for people who ordinarily wouldn't be able to afford a single family residence. Cost per square foot in an ADU is often alarming. People look at this and they say, that's crazy. But what I really like to tell people is that the first 100 square feet are the most expensive. And it's because you're building a kitchen and bathroom and everything into this one small space. And as soon as you start expanding that space, you're amortizing that very expensive investment over a much larger footprint, and the price starts to go down. So there's some sweet spots in here that we try to help people target in order to make this make financial sense.
Hey, Eli, I just got to jump in and say we're at time.
Okay. Thank you. Well,
you can just wrap up.
Okay, here's just a few other examples of our standard builds, including the green one there, which was part of the Multnomah County A Place for You project that we built 2 of the 4 pilot projects for that, which was a really wonderful pilot to try to discover how can we build these things extremely effectively and affordably so that we can get more and more people into housing, which is really the solution to houselessness. And it's something that we're passionate about and we'd love to help more Portlanders with. So that's all from me. If you have any questions, please ask. I'd be happy to answer.
Thanks, Eli. As every builder knows, it's important to stay on budget and on time. And so we are keeping this agenda on time. So Andrew, why don't you come on out? I just wanted to mention before we transition to Andrew that we are gonna keep these presentations on time. And but I realize there's a lot of questions coming in, which are great. We're going to encourage the panelists to answer those questions via chat. But then after the actual hour, we're going to take up to half an hour of Q&A verbally with, and I'll kind of facilitate those questions. So definitely stick around if you have the time after the actual hour-long presentation. All right, so Andrew Morthis of Roofs Homes, come on out.
Great, thanks Cole, and thanks Eli. That's a great looking ADU project. Similar to Eli, Roost Homes is a small residential general contractor. We have been focusing for the last 5 years primarily on accessory dwelling units, although we do remodeling and energy retrofit projects as well. My name is Andrew Morthis. I'm the owner of Roost Homes, and today I'm going to walk you through our 17th Avenue ADU project. So you can see the site plan here. The general program for the project was a solo experienced investor who has managed single-family long-term rental properties for a long time. She liquidated some assets on the East Coast and did a property exchange and bought a nice home in the Alberta district of Northeast Portland. And that's one long-term rental. And then the goal for this project was to utilize this big backyard to build a second long-term rental unit on the property. Because it was an investment, we really wanted to get the maximum program for the building that we could, and wanted to create as full-featured a home as possible on a really small footprint. Our company builds what we call a cost-effective, high-performance home. We believe in the benefits of energy-efficient homes to give low bills to the occupants, comfort, indoor air quality, which is really on the top of a lot of consumers and tenants' minds now during COVID, and then general sustainability. And then what was interesting for this one is the client's desire to potentially have a design that she could replicate on multiple lots, keeping it to a very small footprint. So the primary challenges that we worked through, and you can see a rendering here from my wonderful architect partner, Mitchell Snyder, who specializes in ADUs, and to Eli's point, really squeezes the maximum functionality out of any square foot that we put into these small buildings. The primary challenges for this one, which you'll find on a lot of infill lots, are just that it's a backyard site. You know, for this one, we had about 5 to 6 feet on either side of the main house to get all of our materials, equipment, and everything back there. And we also had to move that same distance to get all of the excavated materials and everything out. So no off-street parking available in a very busy neighborhood around Alberta. It took a lot of logistics to reserve parking when we needed to have equipment on site or when we needed to have materials drops, and then just the cost and time of moving everything to the backyard site. So you'll find that a lot working in Portland. And with that came the challenges of our utility connections. The main house had maxed the available water service, so the client was required to get a new water service. And to get everything to the back of the lot, we had some long trenches, we had some directional drilling, and things just that can add time and cost and complexity to these projects. And really, it was fun to try to optimize the design within the client's budget parameters, obviously, but then also within the design standards that Portland has for accessory dwelling units. If you want to build a home at a certain height, above a certain height threshold, characteristics need to either match the main home or some default aesthetic standards that Portland has put out there. So our goal, while it's not practical, in my opinion, a true one-size-fits-all ADU project, we tried to get something that the client could potentially replicate across multiple lots. So as you can see, the house ended up just like the rendering. So we did our job well, and we were able to get a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath, single family home, just under 800 square feet. We have a very efficient built-in shell, but as part of our work, we try to use relatively standard materials, techniques, and just implement them really well so that we're, again, cost effectively creating a high performance home. We have ductless heat pumps for heating and cooling, all LED lighting. And we work with Energy Trust of Oregon and their new construction EPS program, which provides an energy performance score and anticipated utilities costs and carbon impacts for our new homes. That's still pending, but based on previous projects where we've created essentially very similar details from performance characteristics, I think the bills will be less than $50 a month for this home. And she's going to rent it for $2,000 a month. And, you know, our vision in this was to kind of create the new urban starter home, if you will. And while this is a rental and it's not a for sale product, the tenants that are moving in are a young couple with a toddler. And I think that's the perfect size housing for those type of young families. And now I'll just take you through a quick tour. You can see here, we do have the project at the minimum 5-foot setback here. And this is the compressor for the ductless heat pump, which heats and cools the space highly efficiently. We have a large open floor plan on the main floor, so the tenant can adjust this as they desire based on their lifestyle. We have a little entry nook here with a tile floor for everybody's muddy shoes and everything to kick off. And then we have a very durable bamboo floor, and you can see the ductless mini split head here. nice patio door to a covered porch, allows the tenants a private exterior area separate from the main house tenants. We do really standard kitchen designs with durable, timeless finishes, subway tile, quartz countertops, things that are really going to fit numerous potential tenants or customers, but have durability over time.
Andrew, I just want to mention we're at time.
Okay. So half bath, that could be converted to a pantry, full bath upstairs, bedroom. If you can vault ceilings, it makes small rooms feel larger. Again, we maximize storage, having long-term storage up top there. Lots of natural light and independent zoning for each of the bedrooms. They have their own mini split head. And then you can see it's relatively, works well with the main house in terms of scale and finish and design. So thanks everybody again out there for your interest in middle housing. It's an exciting time to be working in the Portland metro area. And I hope to be doing and see all of us doing a lot more of this housing type soon. So thanks a lot for your time today and have a great afternoon.
And you can believe me, it kills me to have to cut off an ADU presentation. But here we go. Tony Marnella of Marnella Homes, come on out.
All right, thank you, Cole. Well, Marnella Homes, I'm Tony Marnella with Marnella Homes. I've been here in the Northwest for my whole life in real estate and construction in one form or another for over 30 years. We're a design build firm. We build in both Oregon and Washington, a wide range from the small ADU to large customs to townhomes and condos, much like what I'm going to show you here soon. We do certify everything that we build through the National Green Building Standard, NGBS, at their emerald level, all the way up to an off-grid net zero. So the Greenwich is here in North Portland, 6822 North Greenwich Avenue in Portland. And it's a roughly 6,000 square foot, 3-story building. It is on a 50 by 100 lot in an RH zone. It consists of 9 units ranging in size from 564 square feet to 711 square feet, with a mix of 1 bedroom and 1 bath and 2 bedroom, 1 bath, ranging in price from $309,950 to $329,950. The objective of this building was to create luxury condos with healthy and comfortable indoor environments that were not just glorified code-built apartments. The amenities in each unit include 1.95 kilowatts of solar, Bosch appliances, both kitchen and laundry, electric fireplace, continuously running fresh air, and central vac, and designer blinds and smart home features. We really wanted to set these apart from what is out there right now. The building received NGBS certification at the emerald level, as well as the new 2020 wellness standard. We wanted a stylish, upscale, and efficient building that was still approachable to the first-time buyer. And due to the style of the roof, we were not able to get as much solar on the roof as I had hoped. We are working on other roof styles that can allow for the mechanical to be sheltered under a larger solar array that we would ultimately realize a true net zero building. The actual building power for communal lights and the needs of the building actually has its own dedicated solar 1.95 as well. This is an all-electric building with the current modeling of the monthly power expense for these units to be estimated at less than $20 a month. Interestingly, though, the solar is only providing approximately about 30%, a 30% offset to each unit. The combination of how the building was built, air sealed, insulated, fixtures, and appliances make up the greatest reduction in the utility costs. To achieve the performance that we wanted for these units, we wanted to get an aggressive ACH, air exchanges per hour. Our target was less than 1 We ended up with approximately 1.07 average for all the units. This type of construction has its challenges for air sealing. However, working with Northwest Aero Barrier and our insulator, we have made changes in our next group of buildings that we feel will ensure that we'll end up at our targeted air tightness. And for those of you outside of this circle, air tightness is intended both for a healthy and comfortable indoor environment, as well as assisting for energy efficiency. We know from talking to tenants that live in buildings near us that are, code built, standard buildings, that they are paying upwards of $70 to $90 a month for power in a comparable sized apartment. So the under 20 we are modeling will be welcome to our new homeowners. All too often, this buyer is seen as needing only basics in construction, features and amenities, not just due to the price point that is necessary to accommodate them because they are, but also because they're willing to accept what is built in their price range. I feel they deserve more. It's really kind of the genesis behind this for us, is they deserve a higher quality and efficiency than they're typically finding. And we're a little bit more than our competition, but the value of our features and the savings of monthly cost to operate will reward our buyers, our homeowners, year over year. And it's resonating with our buyers and visitors as well, commenting that they are blown away by the features and a low energy cost. We consistently hear that the difference is obvious in comparison to other properties they've seen. And it is really important to have outdoor space in these building types. Each unit has either a patio on the ground level or a balcony on the upper floors that is exclusive use. For the owner, this community is walkable to 2 parks to either side, to the east and to the west of the site. But having, a little space outside that you can call your own is important. This building was able to accommodate full southern exposure from each unit, from both the interior as well as the outdoor space. Get this to click, there we go. The challenges for this type of construction, this building in particular, is parking. We regularly do hear complaints about parking from not only the neighbors that we are becoming neighbors with in the existing neighborhood, as the people that are actually looking at. We have lost some interest in the units due to the parking. It has to be somebody that is typically living in this type of element already and has made that adjustment. The no off-street parking is great for us to maximize the site, but it does create some issues with prospective buyers. From a city processing standpoint, the consistent in interpretation of the city's codes and ordinances can be a challenge when you have each planner interpreting the codes a little bit differently. The delays in the plan review was another. The bureau process is time consuming and can be costly. Restrictions on materials used. There are common, durable, resilient materials, which we require on all of our buildings. Everything must be rot resistant, but they are readily available, but can only be used at certain percentages, and that does impact the cost of these projects. What I do hope to see long-term, and hopefully sooner than later, is lending. I hope that lenders will recognize the increased value of this type of collateral and will bring to market loans that recognize these high performance buildings. They offer lower maintenance to the owners and lower operating costs, which in turn provides an increase in the borrower's ability to repay loans. And thank you for your time. If you have any other questions or like to follow up with me, there's my phone, my email, website, and all my socials. Thank you, Cole.
Thank you so much for sharing your social security number. That was awesome. No, you mean your social, I get it. Tony, the great presentation. Everybody, great presentation. I want to just give a shout out to not just Representative Fahey, but all the other elected officials who are on today's presentation. You guys are the ones who are going to be able to enable the best regulatory environment, which is the first hurdle to getting middle housing to take off. And even if we have the best regulations in the world, middle housing still, unfortunately, is going to have a really hard time taking off. And so we're going to talk about some of the challenges of getting middle housing to take off in some questions and answers now. So if you are able to stick around for a discussion, I would encourage you to do so. And if you are not, thank you so much for joining in what was probably the first ever virtual middle housing tour. I can't imagine there was another one, but it was a really, really good set of presentations, and I think we all gained a lot from it. So, so let's jump into some questions. I think one that is of great interest to a lot of people is about parking. Parking is always a controversial topic when it comes to infill housing. This is in every U.S. jurisdiction, even in Portland, bike walking mecca. So, Douglas, I'd like to hear your thoughts on one question. I'll frame the question, but feel free to answer it a different way, just like any good politician would. Okay, so how many parking spots do you provide on site when you build middle housing? And second follow-up question from a political policy advantage, how many parking spots do you think a city should require for you to put in when you're building middle housing for, say, a fourplex or something else?
0. So it's very situational, but almost universally, if you're trying to put off-street parking into the project, you're driving up the costs dramatically. And maybe Mike's done it in a few instances, but it's very hard to do. You drive up costs dramatically, and you drive down the flexibility for what you can do on the site. At the extreme, if you take the thing that I did, if you need to have parking, what you would do is you put 2 rows of units. They'd be set back a little bit further. They'd be smaller. There'd be a black asphalt strip down the middle. You'd build 3 stories high. You'd tuck a garage underneath. You'd have some wasted space adjacent to it downstairs, and you would increase the price of the unit $75,000. You'd have no community. You'd have higher prices, and you'd have less streets, less cars on the street, but I don't think that's a good trade-off.
Let's hear from somebody else who, one of the other developers who has some ideas to offer on my question.
I mean, I could.
Yeah, Tony, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, it's a double-edged sword, because like the building that I presented to you couldn't have existed had I had off-street parking. It's definitely a commitment that consumer has to make to do that. I would say 1/3 of the people that come to view our condos absolutely love them and walk them out to their car. And if they were able to park near the building, I get to talk to them there, or it's around the block, and they're going, God, if you had parking, I would be signing it right now. So but that buyer, has got to make that acceptance to live there, to have that. But I don't know what the answer is. I just know that I know when we're involving ourselves into a neighborhood and the people that live there can't have guests over to park in front of their home anymore, we get to hear that side of it too, where they're grumbling at us.
Yeah, so it's hard to make these kinds of assessments based on small amounts of data points, but we could say that there's almost a market preference for having off-street parking. Would that be fair based on what you just said, Tony?
There is a market preference for that. I think this buyer is making that decision. Like all the buildings right down from us, the apartment buildings are all full. And all those tenants have made that decision that, okay, to live in this area, this is my give up, and I'm gonna roll with it. But it's not for everybody.
Mike, you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I agree with that. What I've seen, especially in the smaller houses that we're building and selling, the demand for parking, our customers are fine without parking, off-street parking, that is. Now, typically, most of the places that we choose to build, there's usually more than adequate street parking. But yeah, and it is a different, if you've lived in the neighborhood for 30 years, there's no doubt there is an impact. But the people that are actively pursuing coming here and buying, in our experience at least, they're buying into a kind of a lifestyle of typically smaller footprint, and that goes hand in hand with fewer cars or no cars oftentimes. I'd like to think that they're riding bikes. I don't know what the statistics on that are specifically, but I do know that our customers typically want smaller yards and don't require off-street parking.
Great. Erica, you've done some, middle scale, middle housing development. What are your thoughts about off-street parking, and maybe talk a little bit about costs associated with that in terms of what does that cost to the end purchaser of a given unit at one of your developments? If you can try to figure something out, that would be helpful for us.
Sure. I may not be able to answer the cost question, but I'm an architect. We don't know cost as well. But I will say that I think it's also very situational. Tillamook Row is located on a primary bike route, as well as in between two major bus lines and 1.5 miles from downtown Portland. So actually even walkable to downtown Portland. So, in there we provided 8 parking spaces. So about half per unit, basically, and the rest are off-street parking. It's not been an issue. I think also, as I think it was Mike who was mentioning, people who are interested in these kind of smaller footprints, zero energy, are people who are interested in riding their bikes more, taking public transit, and so it's not been an issue at Tillamook Row at all. In the case of Ankeny Row, which is another middle density development that we did, we provided 0 parking, and that's actually in an area that has quite a bit of cars on the parked off site on streets there. And they actually have a shared car that they will all rotate around between. There are a few people who have their own car as well, but that was another way of kind of cutting down on the number of parking spaces that they might take up on the street.
Okay. I don't want to spend the entire time talking about parking, but if there's any additional comments, I'm happy to entertain those before we move on to a different topic. Doug.
It's funny, I put 15 cars on the street in a street on a block that had very few cars. I was chatting with a neighbor because I parked too close to his driveway. We got into a conversation, and he said, "This is kind of misery having all these cars on the street." And he looked at the building and he said, "But this is good for the city. I think most of us get it." And a number of neighbors actually said that, which is really heartening to hear.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think as much as there's griping about off-street parking issues, I think the reality is in residential zones, it just isn't that big of a deal. And, if you can kind of culturally get through the growing pain of the elimination of off-street parking, I don't think it's going to be a huge transition ultimately in residential zones. But obviously that's a controversial topic. All right, so let's talk about HOAs. So a couple of you, Mike, you've done an HOA, and I believe maybe a couple more. Tony, you have. And Erica, was yours an HOA as well?
No, it's not actually. It's an LLC because it's got partly rental as well. So an LLC that the 5 owner-occupied units own a portion of that LLC.
All right, so for the maintenance of common structures in your case, Erica, and I guess, I don't know if you other guys also did common structures, but how is the maintenance handled for common structures?
It's handled through the LLC. So for a renter, it's just like a building that they would rent where the common spaces are paid for by the rent that goes into paying for the apartments, essentially.
And Tony, Mike, any comments about that?
Yeah, it's the HOA has a maintenance schedule that they have, and there's a management company that manages it for them, and that's how it's overseen.
Yeah, same with us. Yeah, we address it pretty specifically on our HOA docs because we do have some private spaces that are typically like fenced backyards and such that are those are the response. They're all different. All of the HOA docs are made up differently for the specific sites, but some of them are such that you maintain parts of your own backyard and watering for that matter. And then any common spaces, we don't have any common buildings, but common spaces that are defined as, common elements of sorts. Those are maintained by usually one party, whether that's an individual. That I try to find a local landscaper to do that, and then the HOA dues that the owners pay for that. So it's really pretty simple.
I'd like to hear some general comments from any of you about the idea of detached versus attached structures in terms of market preference. What are some of the drivers that have compelled you to do detached accessory dwelling units or detached units on your property versus attached units? And this is an open question for anybody who wants to weigh in.
Well, I think probably Mike and Doug will have more immediate response to that because they do a mix, but just from putting my real estate hat on, a detached product is going to have a higher value because it has more glass, it feels more independent than a shared wall community. I mean, a shared, or for instance, in a group of units, the interior units are not going to sell what the outside units typically will. But they've got, when they're detached, like these two guys' projects are, they have that kind of sense of independence, and there's a higher perceived value of that.
Yeah, no doubt. Obviously my whole model is based on detached houses and how can we build those in an affordable fashion. And that's not to say we do actually quite a bit of attached housing as well. But the market has told us our preference would be to have detached single family houses. They're just universally understood. We've been doing it for a very, very long time, and people understand that space. And in my opinion, it's just my opinion that they want that space. And it's funny because I have a good friend who grew up in South Korea, and it never occurred to me she likes like a multi-story condo building. And as I got into it further, I asked, well, why? And she said, well, it's the security of it. There's only one door in and one door out, and I go upstairs and it's very secure. And I had never thought of it that way. So, I mean, I see that other side of it, but I can only speak for my customers and what we build. And there's no doubt, we want, as far as multiple units on a specific lot, whether it's duplexes, triplexes, whatever it is, we would like those to be able to be completely detached. So by definition, I'm not sure if it's a state or a city thing, but by definition, I think in the city of Portland, they're attached. And I think people's preference, if they're going to be a homeowner, would be for them to be detached.
So there's another issue that's really very important, worth thinking about, and I've sold a bunch of Mike's stuff. Agree with Mike that there's generally a preference for detached. There's a wonderful sort of kicker if you're doing detached units. So for example, if you had a decent sized lot and you could do a fourplex, it'd be great to be able to do a cluster of 4 units. It's preferred by the buyers, but it also, in terms of condo litigation, you're just a much less ripe target. And that's pretty significant.
Yes.
It's a huge driver, actually.
I guess, I'm going to ask one question about condoization for those who have done it before. Can you just talk about any successes, or what would you say, is that a successful way to sell this type of housing? Or like, is it going to be, do we need to work on legislative fixes in terms of the condo defect law, or can we just go with condoization? Mike, Tony, comments?
Yeah, let Mike go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we do, because, we're building houses that are completely detached. The only thing, they're separately metered. They're completely detached structures, just like the house that's been there for 85 years next door to us on both sides for miles. The only thing that's attached is the sewer line within about 10 feet back, the backside of the sidewalk. So as far as the condo litigation stuff, they, by all intents and purposes, are exactly the same house that's right across the street, that's been there forever. And so, it's a really complicated issue, but I think that the condo defect stuff, it seems to me that applies more to high rises and stuff where you're sharing walls, you're sharing utilities, things of that sort, whereas our stuff is completely separate. So.
Well, I can say though that it is the condo litigation defect issue is something that I feel that needs to be addressed, because whether it's a building of 8 townhomes or a small little building like mine, we're still a target. It's one of the reasons a lot of people will not touch condos is because we have trades that literally won't do it. Their insurance companies say, do not, even though we'll say, look, I want you to do this work. You do amazing work. I'll pay for the rider. Just add it to your quote. They don't want anything to do with it because they've been drawn into that one job that they were drug into court because they painted and it ended up being something completely unrelated, or they did the landscape on it and they got pulled in and they just, it's a no-go for them anymore. So I think that is an issue from a site maximizing concept. We've done what our attorney called the shoebox condo, which is a lot like what Mike does, able to maximize out of site and move your density around. It also saves time going through a land use process, not having to go through a subdivision plat versus going through a condo, using the condo method. So there's benefits to it, but you do have, when you start attaching units, you do put a target on your back.
Great, thanks. Okay, this is going to be an open-ended question for everybody to kind of think about. Complicated question here, but this will be the final topic of our Q&A. So we'll let it go for a little while. So Oregon is doing a House Bill 2001 in large part as the policy driver here being around affordable housing, which it should be. So what are things that Oregon governments and others, I guess, could do to support smaller duplexes and middle housing units that would be more affordable and might be more affordable for lower income groups? And there's a general sentiment that all new housing is expensive, and it is. So what are some additional steps that governments could take to make middle housing more accessible? Is it just size? And I'll get to you, Mike. And I guess I'll leave it at that. Thanks. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so there's two. Oh, I'm sorry. There's two things that the city of Portland's doing that I think are awesome. They're incredible. The SDC waiver program. So they've established thresholds that, first of all, your buyer, and I speak from a builder who is building for end users, for homeowners, right? So the SDC waiver program is a waiver of approximately half of the SDCs, or I take that back, all of the SDCs, if the property sells to a qualifying buyer at less than, I think the threshold right now is $405,000. And it's an incredible program, and we try to take advantage of it whenever we can. But it's really hard to build houses for less than $400,000 in the city of Portland. For other jurisdictions, I would really encourage considering that. And then the other program locally here is the tax abatement program. And I think maybe Doug's probably a better candidate to answer that because he's done more. But that's a program where I believe the improvement value of the home, and it has to be new construction and it can be condo, the taxable value is only on the property, not the improvements for the first 10 years. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but
so same. It's okay.
Yeah, go on.
So same criteria. I think the median income figure they use is 87,000 and the house sale is less than 405. There's 100 units a year that will qualify this Holte program, where if the building costs less than this and the buyer earns less than that, they waive about 3/4 of your taxes effectively. Separately, Cole, it's a great program. Cole, separately, I think we really often ask the wrong question when we say, how can we build affordable new construction? It's not necessarily the point. If you're trying to create affordability, new homes are almost, by virtue of what they are, going to be the most expensive real estate available. To me, the question is, do you want this lot to have 2 homes on it, which was the case prior to my building, or 12? And those, when you increase supply, it might be, look, mine sold at 3 1/4 to 365. Those are pretty affordable. It's hard to do. Regardless of what your price point is, the more density we create, the more supply we create, it's going to filter through the system. And I think it's a trap to keep answering that question. How do we build private sector affordable homes? It's not really the right question to ask. I think the question to ask is, how do we increase supply so that we'll have affordability filtering through the system?
No, the answer is simple. You just wait 100 years, then middle housing will become less expensive.
Hey,
So,
Cole.
yeah, go ahead, Andrew. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't necessarily related to affordability for multifamily projects, but as somebody who's done a lot of ADUs, I've found that most of my clients do tend to be upper middle class, higher income levels. They can afford a home, they've got significant equity, and they've been able to get financing products in the market to leverage that equity. I think something that I'd really like to see our local governments and public-private partnerships bring is the ability for longtime homeowners in these neighborhoods who may have some equity, but may not have the liquid reserves or the cash flow to qualify for traditional financing, to create programs where these folks can stay in their homes, build an ADU, and create generational wealth and income that can be passed on. In a way, it's an anti-gentrification measure. And I'd really like to see some innovative things like that in the coming years.
I'd like to add one thing. The Multnomah County Innovation Project, that the Place for You project, it's a tough name to say, was a great attempt at this. It was just the first try. And I believe they're considering multiple iterations of this, or another example of it. We built 2 of the units for that. And that type of program where the government can come in and subsidize an ADU construction, there's tons of different ways to do that, and it adds lots of housing, distributed housing. If it's focused on people who are suffering from houselessness or just don't have the ability to afford housing in Portland and they can subsidize it in some way, it's a huge boon to the neighborhoods, the economy, and the people involved, both on the ownership and the renters, or the people occupying the housing. I think that program is a real example of success, and it's just a matter of figuring out the details.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for the panel Q&A. Thank you guys for pioneering new models of housing development, which is going to hopefully take off in a variety of places throughout the state under the great new law that we are going to be underneath in the next couple of years. I'm going to hand it back over to Ezra Hammer from HBA.
Thanks so much, Cole, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We had over 330 registrants and many folks from jurisdictions around the region who are going to be working diligently over the next 2 years to craft middle housing bills. So I hope that these presentations were helpful to you in understanding the myriad type of housing that can exist in your communities and that your communities can benefit from having. As was mentioned by the speakers, one major component to the high cost of housing in our region is access to housing. Over the past 10 years, we've built 6 units of housing for every 10 households that have been formed, meaning that every 10 families are competing for an ever scarcer amount of housing. That factor in and of itself is a major driver in housing costs, and House Bill 2001 in middle housing is going to go a long way in allowing for more housing to come to market. As you've seen, much of this product integrates seamlessly into existing communities, and different folks who might not otherwise be able to buy in or rent into those communities is able to do so. That's why middle housing is seen nationwide as a great tool to combat some of the impacts of gentrification and some of this natural occurring segregation, which we've seen here over the years. So with middle housing, we can all take a step towards creating a more just and a more accessible Oregon for all Oregonian families. Thank you everyone again for joining us. We will be sending out a recording of this presentation as well as a deck slide on the individual projects that you saw. Importantly, because this was mentioned by a couple of folks in the chat, the overwhelming majority of the units which you saw today sold at less than the $405,000 level that Douglas mentioned, which in the city of Portland would be accessible to a family making less than the area median income and not becoming house burdened by buying or renting that unit. So while that number may sound high here in the Portland region, it is broadly accessible. And as this product is built throughout the state of Oregon, it will be at an even more attainable price point. So thank you all again for joining us. On behalf of the Build Small Coalition, Metro, and the Home Builders Association of Metropolitan Portland, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ezra.